We have a verdict in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal case after all of these weeks. And if you thought that was the only major decision of the day, you would be wrong. We're going to talk about.
Did he break down in court? And by break down, we don't mean just a few tears or a dramatic pause. We mean total collapse. A full-body, soul-bending moment of defeat. A man who once commanded rooms, stages, boardrooms, now crumbling under the weight of a sentence so severe it shattered every expectation.
Not guilty. Sex trafficking of Jane. Not guilty. Transportation to engage in prostitution. Cassie. Guilty. Transportation to engage in prostitution. Jane. Guilty. That was the historic verdict out of the Sean Diddy Combs criminal court today. A split verdict after almost 13 hours of deliberations and weeks of testimony and evidence and arguments. The 12 jurors acquitted Sean Combs of the more severe charges, the ones that carried the stiffest prison sentence, potentially 15 years to life in prison, but convicted him of the Mann Act charges, which, by the way, carry up to 10 years in prison each, although I will tell you in a filing today from the government, it appears the sentencing range they're looking for is 51 to 63 months, so 4 to 5 years. However, there is no mandatory minimum. So would the judge go lower? We'll talk about what the defense is asking for too. And also, whatever the sentences are, would he combine the sentences consecutively, one after another? Maybe, maybe not. A lot of questions, but I'll tell you what, you would think that the verdict would be just the only big part of today. You would think that's the only major decision. Not the case. Because we got to talk about what happened later on in the day. The bail hearing. Right after the verdict, it was a question of should Sean Combs be granted release while awaiting sentencing, which the judge set today, by the way. Sort of set the sentencing date. I'll talk more about that as well. But I mean, let's talk about Sean Combs. He's been locked up since September 2024. He's been denied bail at each turn. There was a change of circumstances here. He had just been acquitted of 3 of the charges. So could he make bail? We're going to talk about it. All right, so to discuss the hearing and more, let me bring on once again, hopefully not for the last time, but we're at basically the end of this case until sentencing. Joined once again by long crimes in court reporter Elizabeth Milner. Great to see you. First of all, your reaction to the verdict. Is this what you expected? Because let's really briefly explain what happened yesterday. That, you know, we thought it kind of gave us a preview into what would happen today. Not necessarily so.
Yeah, I was not going to lie, Jesse, a little surprised by the verdict in that I really kind of thought there was a really strong case for count 2, that obviously being sex trafficking as it relates to Cassie Ventura. And that was only because of the questions that the jury was asking when they were bringing some notes back. And that was kind of in relation to what had happened at specific instances that the government point out were allegations of sex trafficking. So I thought because of the tone that was inside the courtroom, the way the family was getting a little bit emotional sitting inside the gallery, even Diddy's demeanor, for the most part, we've seen him kind of really keep up his spirits. But yesterday was really a time where we kind of saw, I think, the weight weighing in on him, that it's possible a conviction on some of the more serious charges were going to happen. And so when the jury came back not guilty on count 1, 2, and 4, you know, I was a little surprised, especially to count 2, but, you know, I do respect the jury's decision. They spent a lot of time listening to this case, listening to all the testimony, listening to all the evidence, and that was the verdict that they had rendered.
Yep. I wasn't surprised that they found him guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. We have been saying since for weeks on this show, that felt like a straightforward path to conviction. Wasn't surprised, not guilty with Jane, given some of the gray areas of her testimony, but also the jury didn't even ask for one readback of her testimony or anything to do with her testimony, so it made me think they might have already been decided there. I was surprised about Cassie Ventura sex trafficking just because, like you said, the readback of that testimony, and then shortly thereafter, they came back yesterday and said, we have a verdict on that charge. So I thought, they're convinced. And when it came to record,
the courtroom was electric. Every eye locked on him. A man navigating years of scandal, from leaked tapes to explosive allegations, hidden suits, and whispered rumors, finally facing his reckoning. The moment the judge began to speak, you could feel the air tighten. No ceremonial delay, no final statements. The judge turned pages and read the terms, count by count, year by year. The sentence was slapped on the table, and he froze at first, still blinking, maybe hoping it was a misread. number, then disbelief, then the realization, and it hit him like a tidal wave. He bowed his head, fists clenched. The weight of everything, legacy, power, empire, crushing him in a single moment. Nobody moved. Not the prosecutors, not the gallery, not his team, not even the court reporters. Because what just dropped wasn't just long. It was nuclear. A sentence. So heavy, so final, so beyond anything anticipated, it felt like watching the collapse of an entire dynasty. He didn't protest. He didn't argue.
I thought they were still going to be hung because they said they were at an impasse yesterday. It seemed like based on their note, there was no way that would change. The judge told them to continue deliberating. They come back today, and like in an hour, they come back, not guilty on racketeering. I'm not really sure what that split ultimately will be. Maybe the jurors will speak out and we'll hear. Got to ask you about Diddy's reaction. Okay, so we have courtroom sketches of what it looked like. You were in there. What was his reaction to the verdict?
Oh, he was very pleased with the verdict. Obviously, I think for the defense and the defendant, that being Sean Combs, I think obviously they would have wanted an acquittal on all the charges. But I think given that they weren't a conviction on the more serious charges of RICO conspiracy and sex trafficking as it relates to Cassie in one charge and Jane in another charge, I think overall Combs was very, very pleased with the jury, to the point where I saw him kind of mouth a little thank you to the jurors as they were still sitting kind of in the jury box, as they were kind of leaving for the end of their day. Obviously, we still have some more matters to address for our end. But in terms of just his reaction, even his family's reaction, Jesse, I think they were so happy knowing that there's such a strong possibility that their father will come home. Obviously, if he would have been convicted on the more serious charges, that might have been a different discussion. But given that he was only convicted on count 3 and 5, that being the Mann Act, it seems like given that it comes with a lesser penalty and sentencing, I think the family is like, yes, our father is coming home, our loved one is coming home, and we hope to see him very, very soon.
And talk about a reaction. Outside that courthouse, my gosh, what has been going on out there? There's what, verbal disputes, people spraying things. What is, just give us a brief summary of what you've witnessed outside that courthouse after the verdict.
I witnessed a lot, Jesse. A lot was going on. There was kind of, I will even say, pandemonium after the verdict was read. And outside, a lot of Diddy supporters, a lot of people who are kind of with the Free Diddy, I wouldn't say movement, but I guess, they believed in his innocence. They were very pleased, even thinking that it was a possibility he'd just walk outside of that courthouse at some point. But it was a lot of commotion. I did see some people getting to some heated debates, especially in relation to Cassie. I saw some people getting very upset because they believed that the government was trying to take a good man down who did a lot for the culture. Those types of conversations were being had from a lot of people in the public. I even saw some kind of weirder things, and that being people squirting baby oil on themselves. And one of the reporters even got some on her shirt by one of the people who were kind of over in that area. And so a lot was going on, to the point that I think the courthouse police were just kind of like, okay, we need everybody to calm down. They have barricades going all the way down the street. I think in the event that Sean Combs would have walked out of that courthouse, it would have just been straight chaos, I think, outside. But for the most part, especially with that not happening around that time frame, that a lot of people, especially his supporters, were very pleased. And obviously for some, they were a little disappointed with the verdict. But for most that we could see here at the courthouse, a lot seemed pleased by today's decision.
So, Elizabeth, let's talk about what happened next. Because right after the verdict, it goes into the idea of, can he be released on bail? Okay, and the judge set a hearing for 5 p.m. So later on today, you literally, at the time of this recording, just got out of there. Remember, from a legal point of view, the burden is on the defense to show that Sean Combs is not a danger or won't flee. What was the judge's?
He didn't plead. His shoulders sagged, eyes reddened, head in his hands. That's when the tears came. Quiet tears. Tears of silence. Tears that said more than any press release could. The man who built a brand, a label, a cultural empire, now shown in fragments, undone. This was not just another celebrity downfall. This was the moment the facade cracked. For months, scandal after scandal came and went. Big names dropping statements, anonymous sources feeding rumors, stories building into waves. But today, the courtroom ate it all, digested it, and served it back with interest. That sentence was final. It was damning. It was unbelievable. No one saw it coming. Not his lawyers, who looked stunned. Not the defense analysts who kept there. Headlines measured and cautious, not the media outlets which prepped for a range of scenarios.
Did the judge decide that?
Well, given that the top of our show, Jesse, or the top of your show, because it's a sidebar presented by Law and Crime with the host of Jesse Weber, but given at the top of the show that we didn't announce that Sean Combs walked out of this courthouse, I think it was kind of a little bit of a spoiler for the viewers here that the judge decided to keep him behind bars until his sentencing hearing. So I did see kind of a little bit of disappointment from both Sean Combs and his family after the judge made his decision. So the judge said that the jury convicted the defendant on count 3 and 5. That being the Mann Act. He says bail is denied because the government correctly noted that detention is mandatory and it's not appropriate for Sean Combs to be released on bail given the charges that he's still been convicted of. And so the judge says that they disagree with the defense's argument, saying that any felony under 117, and Jesse, you probably know that more than me, requires detention. And he said even if the defendant is required to not be likely to present a danger to the community, the judge even kind of pointing out just some of what we had heard during the trial where the defense conceded that the defendant, Sean Combs, was violent. The judge said, we own the domestic violence. That was a word that he took from the transcript because Mark Agnifilo had said that in open court. He told the jurors that, and he told them that multiple times. And the judge pointed it out multiple times from the transcript. He says that the defendant's concession as to domestic violence wasn't necessary. He pointed out Mark Agnifilo's closing where he says it's horrible for Miss Ventura what she had gone through and that domestic violence is the issue, kind of even pointing to her Instagram statement that she had made after the 2016 video was released on CNN. And again, the judge was saying that the video is very much domestic violence, even kind of pointing to the London hotel incident, saying where Mark Agnifilo had pointed out that obviously something happened, that he was violent at times, and that conceding the defendant's violence, that he even poses no danger, that he was pointing to violence happened after the HSI raids in March of 2024, because they kind of pointed to what had happened to Jane just a couple months after, and pointing back to the June 2024 incident, which was just a little more than a year ago to this day. And so for those reasons and just some more reasons too, the judge decided that the defendant will remain behind bars pending his sentencing.
And yeah, I looked at the government's letter and they were like, they talked about violence, they talked about drug use, they talked about the abuse of Cassie, that you have multiple victims in this case, that he used the staff to carry out these transportation to engage in prostitution crimes, that he tried to obstruct justice with respect to these crimes, that under the Bail Reformed Act, they argued this was a crime of violence, that he poses a serious risk of flight, a danger to the community. So clearly it seems that the judge was persuaded by that. The judge did mention something really, really interesting, because somebody would listen to this and say, oh my gosh, he's going to throw the book at him. He actually said the court
none of which involved this level of devastation. This was beyond their wildest predictions. And the judge didn't mince words. This wasn't just about one case. It was about patterns, about what came before, about the months and years of scandal. The testimonies, the witnesses, the corporate cover-ups, the culture of silence. The judge addressed it head-on, made it clear this sentence was a summation, not just a penalty, but a statement that no matter who you are, no matter how vast your empire, pattern matters, behavior matters, reputation matters. And when the court perceives a pattern, it responds with weight. In that lecture, Diddy sat motionless, like every word was a brick in his own downfall. His team leaned in, reporters held their breath, and the moment the gavel dropped, it felt like the end of an era. And yet, outside the courtroom, chaos. Fans wept, protesters shouted, reporters scrambled to go live.